Hey good people, Batavia here. We're in the backyard and we're talking containers. See you in a few. Okie doke. So, quick housekeeping items. Thank you to those who like, watch, comment, share, subscribe to Be Better Garden. We appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed already, consider it. There's a button somewhere below, and if you do, hit the notification bell so you're alerted each time I share more #Garden Joy. All right, so the last video we were in the front yard garden. We talked about all things we were growing in there. This week we are in the backyard, but we're only focusing on container gardening. So I think it's somewhere upwards closer to 40 containers now that we're growing food in, and we're transitioning some things that were still in our spring gardening, if you will. Let's go ahead and dig in. Okie doke. So we're gonna pick up at the very top of the deck. I have since sown beets. This variety was said to be sown as late as June. We'll see if it actually forms beet roots, but I'm looking forward to using this size container for this. But the heat may be a little bit too much for it, so we'll see. I have one of my favorite flower containers, but we're going to focus on vegetables and herbs. Speaking of purple basil, lemon balm, and then this is the lettuce leaf basil, which I just love how big it is. I'm gonna have to start pinching some of this off because it's starting to try to produce a flower head, so we're gonna take care of that. Real quick note, the tulle fabric that I use, I pulled it off of some of the containers and we'll show you kind of what happened with those, but this is the fabric that I use to cover most of my brassicas, and I found that it's really effective for the raised beds that I use it on. We'll talk about what happened with the containers. This little section here, Early Scallop, I think is the name. It's a summer squash. So I have one plant here, and there's another in buckets. This was supposed to be some direct sowed lettuce that hasn't germinated. This is about, I want to say, 2 weeks ago. But the Nevada lettuce has germinated and looks really good. I sowed a few extra seeds, so I'm probably going to try to transplant this into one of these other containers. And this is where I tried to sow Paris Island. We have some flowers here, but then we have some peppers, and I really like this size container. I'm pretty sure I bought like peppers and maybe a tomato plant a few years ago and just saved the containers. But I don't know, I guess maybe a gallon, maybe a gallon and a half. But these peppers have done really well the last couple of years in these size containers. So I have like a snack size pepper, which is a picnic orange pepper here. You can see some of the peppers are starting to form. And then I have Anaheim chili pepper. We have flowers, but no peppers just yet. And then this is labeled Shishitsu. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, but it doesn't look like that. So we're gonna see what happens. I may have got the tag wrong for that. Let's take a look at our buckets. So our buckets are growing over here. This is that parsley that overwintered, and I'm just letting it go to seed. This is celery, and luckily I have celery in a bunch of different places. I think these are 2-gallon containers for the buckets. I maybe just didn't water enough. We know celery needs a lot of water, but this may be lost. So I'm gonna come back in and give it a good water and keep an eye on it. This is one of my favorite chards. This is the Ford Hook chard in a 2-gallon container. I've seen it get much larger, so I do think there is some growth issue, if you will, based on the size container it's grown in, but still absolutely edible. So these are some of the red cabbage, which at this point I'm calling ornamental, because either the container size, which I'm not leaning towards, I'm leaning towards me planting this so close to summer that the heat caught it. You can see also some damage here. If you look inside, you can see like this is one of my earliest planted cabbage, and it's just done wonderful, and it's under that tulle fabric that I mentioned. But then I have a few different peppers here. 4-gallon container is doing fine. I planted this out a little bit later because I was just trying to find a place for some things. This is a 5-gallon container. Look how big this plant is, this pepper plant. This is a jalapeno pepper plant. So another pepper plant This is the experiment for the potatoes. I did 1 seed potato in a 5-gallon container, and then this is the other early scallop squash. So it's looking pretty good. I haven't had any issues growing squash in containers. Squash vine borer has been my issue this last season, so we're hoping that that's not the case. So I pulled out all of the containers that basically are going to meet their maker. All of these black containers are the ones I had under that tulle fabric, and I think this time the way I had them lined up gave opportunity for the cabbage moth to get inside. So you can see damage on all of my kale. I think some of this is a mixture again of planting it so late where the heat came in and didn't give some of this cabbage a chance to take off. I'm going to see, so my plan is to pull these plants like within the next week. I'm going to see if the inside of this cabbage, this little bitty head, is edible. I'm going to toss all of the other leaves, and then like for this cauliflower, I'm just going to toss this entire thing. It just didn't make it. So I'm still pro these size plants can grow in these size containers. I think I just planted them too late. So these were planted closer to like May, where some of my early brassicas were planted like as early as the first week in April. But here's another experiment. So nasturtiums did not deter what I'm going to again blame the cabbage moth for. And I can see the worm there, that green thing right there. So this is that lacinato dinosaur Tuscan kale. It has just eaten it up, and this is the second year I've seen this type of damage when I didn't protect this particular kale. Here is more different size container, but more cabbage. You can see it's being eaten up. So this is going to end up getting tossed. Same thing for this. It's such a disappointment. My planning was very intentional. I wanted to kind of, scatter how I planted this because I didn't want a bunch of heads of cabbage at the same time. But next year I'm planting them all as early as I can, and we're going to see if we can beat the heat coming from spring into summer. So this, I'm thinking of letting go to seed and save them. So this is bok choy. So I did get some leaves off of it. But again, all of these were under the tulle fabric. And I know, again, it's highly recommended. But you really have to do a really good job at securing it. So you can see I really have this locked down in my raised beds. And, I see no damage. Things like flies and stuff sometimes get in there, bees. But I've not seen a cabbage moth. So this is just a quick shot of what kind of the tulle fabric can do. These are my collard greens, which are looking great. So speaking of, let's look at collard greens that were uncovered. So these plants are getting big. These are collards that were in 2 containers. Let's show you the size container. And you can see nasturtiums are all over the place. So the goal here was to see 2 things. One was this container deep enough to support this kind of plant, which clearly it is, because you can see the size of the plant. But 2, could I leave these uncovered and use nasturtiums, which I've read the cabbage moth prefers, if you will. That may not be the right kind of description of it, but the answer is, in this situation, they're going to still eat the collard greens. And I'm looking at, you can see him wiggling right there. Hope that focuses in. And eating away. Some of the damage is so completely eaten up both sides of this plant. So the good news is that a few holes really doesn't stop, the enjoyment of these plants. I'm going to still cut them. They're going to get a good cleaning. Some of these leaves like these I'll just toss, but they're still going to be eaten. But what I am going to do, since I have a bed that has beautiful collard greens in them that are doing well, I'm going to end up pulling these plants out when I do harvest the collards. Normally I do the cut and come again with collards, but I'll pull the plants. All of these are going to be focused really on fall planting. So I'm going to still make use of the space in the containers, but I'm going to kind of redeploy my energy. I may let the kale go a little while longer, I'm not sure. I ended up cleaning this up, so I pulled off all the really bad leaves, but that is the story on those containers. We're going to come around to a place where we had really good luck with nasturtiums. So I left this in here because I didn't want to disturb it, but this is direct sowed kale, a scarlet red kale, and then your typical curly kale. And I mean, it's like literally no damage at all. So it's not really, they're not big plants, but hey, they're still producing. So this is a win. This is a success story. I do see a little bit of damage right here, but I mean, that's nothing compared to some of these other plants. All right, so rounding out, I have the herbs here. I mixed in a bunch of different things, but they're doing well in these 10-gallon containers. These are a couple of like your snack size peppers. So I tucked these in, and these are doing well. I left this lettuce here that's bolted just to kind of show you how much you can get into one container here. So if you can see, I have 2 pepper plants. Knowing that these are smaller pepper plants compared to like your big bell peppers, and I ended up putting 3 lettuce plants in there. So knowing that they wouldn't all go the full season. This is it was direct sowed on 6/8, and it is your typical zucchini. And then I have your yellow squash. It could be the reverse. We'll see when it starts. I did tag them, but one is your regular zucchini, one's your yellow squash. Then we have, rounding out, potatoes. So 10-gallon all the way down for the grow bags, and then I start with a 20-gallon right here. And so when we first showed this, we wondered how convenient this would be. It's not the most convenient, so we'll see if we keep this design next year, but it's working. I have a bunch of different potatoes in here. These are all planted kind of going back to May, so we still have some time on them. So there's like a Yukon Gold here, there's a Huckleberry Gold, and then that last plant is a fingerling potato. So I'm going to show you this real quick because I forgot last time. This is where I have sweet potatoes in a grow bag, 20 gallons. I'm trying that again this year because I didn't have great success with it last year, but I'm still uber curious. This doesn't look as good as the sweet potatoes that are in my raised bed in the front yard, but we'll see what it produces. All right, so last containers. These are all 20 gallon. And just to note, I got these from Lowe's. The grow bags are from Amazon. The other containers are from places like Lowe's and Home Depot. But let me know if you have questions about a specific container. So this is corn. I'm trying in these 2. I planted this much later than I planted the corn that is over there. But I did drop some lettuce in here, which, I mean, I keep on saying it, but it's mid-July, so all the lettuce that I have that I planted earlier this year started in bolt. But since I have had success with planting lettuce in Chicago, I'm in zone 6 in like starting in June. I've had success. I've tried to re-sow some of that we showed you earlier. So I'm going to end up pulling out probably 1 or 2 of these plants, thinning them out. But this is where I did a couple of cucumber plants, a bush variety, as well as a sunflower, just because. So I direct sowed that on June the 8th. So these are cucumber plants that are just over a month old. So they are growing and climbing. I'm going to figure out what I'll do. We'll see how big they get when it comes to additional trellising. But for now, that's the setup. Okra, which is doing well. I think I have 3 plants in here. Last time I think I told a fib and said, oh, I'm going to pull one, and I haven't, and I probably won't. But then lastly, I totally thought they were cherry tomatoes. There's logic behind why I thought that, but here we are. They are green zebra. Luckily, I'm a lover of green zebra tomatoes. So thanks for spending some time with me. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, feel free to drop them below. And I think we're going to do raised beds as far as the next video. So I shall see you all then.